What's up guys, how's it going? My name is Joe. We are back with another episode of British Guy Reacts, and today we're reacting to a very important video. How did every MLB team get its name? Now previously I did a tier list where I ranked the logos of each MLB team, and I did have a lot of fun doing that. I do also realize it's kind of disrespectful for me to do that without any research into the team. So this is where the important stuff comes in. We're here to learn today. We're not here to slander anyone's names or logos or disrespect anyone. You know, we're here to learn, to educate ourselves on the history behind these teams, the names, the logos, anything else that goes along with that. If you are new around here, please do subscribe, because I've checked my analytics recently and 77% of people watching my videos aren't subscribed. That's painful for me, guys. So painful. So please do click that red button. We're going to jump straight into this. It's a long one, so we're going to do part 1 and 2 on this. Yeah, let's jump straight in. Let's go. Let's get it. It's going to be part 1.
Here's how every MLB team got its name. First on our list is the Atlanta Braves.
Okay.
The team stakes a strong claim on the title of the longest continuously playing American professional sports team. Founded in 1871, the team came into existence after the first fully professional team, the Cincinnati Red Stockings, dissolved in 1870. Then player, manager, and 3 others moved to Boston to help start a new team as the Boston Red Stockings.
Oh, Red Stockings.
Borrowing the uniforms and the name from the Cincinnati-based team. This new team was a founding member of the National Association of Professional Baseball Players, or simply the National Association. In fact, the Braves remain one of 2 teams still in existence from that original NAPBBP. Whew.
So I know I shouldn't talk over it, so I am going to pause when I talk. This Atlanta Braves logo is way better than the one I reacted to, which was just the A. I'm wondering if the one I reacted to was cut off when I ranked it. I don't know, but this one's nice. I like it.
That was a mouthful. In 1876, the National League, which would become one of the 2 halves of Major League Baseball, replaced the National Association. At this point, our team was referred to as the Boston Red Caps because of another already existing team in the National League named the Cincinnati Red Stockings, taking the original name from that original Cincinnati team. Another nickname they picked up along the way in 1883 was the Boston Bean Eaters, probably paying tribute to those delicious pork and molasses Boston baked beans. In 1901, the Boston Americans, we'll get to them later, set up shop across town and started a decade-long drought of poor seasons for our red-capped, red-stocking bean eaters. In 1907, the owner ditched the Red Stockings, literally, and all of the other nicknames and renamed the team the Boston Doves. However, still struggling on the field, the team tried out another nickname, the Boston Rustlers, in 1911, before finally settling on the Boston Braves in 1912. Braves was chosen after the owner, James Gaffney, who was a member of a political organization called Tammany Hall. Tammany Hall was named after a leader of the Lenape people, Tammany, and members of the organization were called Braves. The term Braves is in reference to Native Americans and comes from the long history of violent conflict starting with European settlement and continuing through the 19th century with U.S. expansion further west. The Native American warriors were often referred to as Braves. In order to fully understand the depth, history, atrocities, complex feelings, and everything that comes with using Native Americans as mascots in sports is definitely beyond the scope of this video, and not something I would ever claim to be an expert in. Good choice, mate. But this is how the name came about, so do with that information what you will. P.S. This won't be the last time that this comes up. After a failed attempt to avoid money problems by signing Babe Ruth for the 1935 season, new ownership changed the team name from the Braves to the Boston Bees. And another ownership change in 1941 prompted the name change back to the Boston Braves, but this did little to change their fortunes. In 1953, the team relocated to Milwaukee, becoming the Milwaukee Braves. In Milwaukee, the Braves had success both on the field and financially. Their success actually inspired 3 other teams on our list to relocate as well. In fact, this team was so successful that their entire time in Milwaukee, they never had a losing season. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. The team was sold in 1962 and the new owner immediately wanted to move the team to
Atlanta.
a bigger TV market. Finally, in 1966, and much to the dismay of the city of Milwaukee, the Braves moved to Atlanta, becoming the Atlanta Braves that we know today.
Okay.
The Chicago Cubs started life as an experimental team with only a handful of contests to test the appetite for baseball in Chicago, and they were called the Chicago White Stockings. White Stockings was chosen as the team name originally because of the white uniforms that the players wore. With most teams of this time period, the nicknames weren't really official, and generally they were picked by the sports journalists that were covering the game. The most popular names stuck. After a successful test in 1870, the White Stockings became a fully professional team, joining the National Association for their inaugural season in 1871. Despite starting in the National Association at the same time as the Atlanta Braves, the Chicago Cubs comes in at number 2 on our list because they did not play for 2 years after the 1870s.
This is kind of off the point. This is one thing I noticed in both the tier lists I did with the American football logos and the baseball logos. Chicago don't like putting the animals on the badge, right? Because the Chicago Bears also don't have any bear on the logo. And I mean, the old logo's right, but come on. Everyone loves an animal on the logo. Get with the game.
71 Chicago Fire. In the early days, the most prominent player for the White Stockings was Cap Anson. He played for 21 seasons with Chicago, 18 of which he was also the team's manager. Because of his propensity for trading away star players for younger, stronger players, by 1890 the team became the Chicago Colts. Now, when Anson left the club, the sad sports franchise felt abandoned and was left with a roster full of a bunch of young players nobody had ever heard of. The most popular names during this time period were the Chicago Remnants and the Chicago Orphans. And while both of those nicknames were popularly used, they slowly fell out of favor as a new nickname emerged, the Chicago Cubs. Cubs was a more playful and hopeful outlook on a young team that would set the foundation for one of the most recognizable American sports franchises. Much better choice than the Orphans.
Much better.
After losing his baseball team, the Cincinnati Red Stockings, in 1871, and seeing them essentially become the Boston Braves, the city of Cincinnati again lost a second team that was also called the Cincinnati Red Stockings in 1880. Now, a third iteration of the Cincinnati Red Stockings began playing in the American Association in 1882. In 1890, the Red Stockings moved permanently to the National League, and it was at this time that the team dropped their stockings, metaphorically, and became known as the Cincinnati Reds. And that would be the end of this section if it wasn't for just one slight detour. You see, this is where we get sidetracked from a great baseball name. It's a few years after World War II, and people are freaking out about communism. Well, one person in particular is freaking out about communism. The eventually disgraced and officially censured Wisconsin Senator Joe McCarthy. McCarthyism, also known as the Red Scare, was a period of time in American history where we collectively lost our minds and started attacking our fellow citizens, calling them communists and socialists, and trying to use those attacks to score political points. Whew, I'm so thankful that it's not like that today. So, because of this Red Scare, the Cincinnati Reds changed their names in 1954 to the Cincinnati Redlegs. Thankfully for all of us, the name change never caught on.
This mascot's nice though. Look, it looks kind of like the Pringle guy and the Monopoly guy like combined into a baseball mascot. This is a cool mascot, man. I like it. But the Cincinnati Redlegs, what is that about? Oh my days.
1959, the team returned to being the Cincinnati Reds. In 1882, the Pittsburgh Pirates were founded in the neighboring city of Allegheny as the Allegheny Baseball Club of Pittsburgh. Since that's a really long name, they were often referred to simply as the Alleghenies, leading them to eventually be called the Pittsburgh Alleghenies. Now, going into the 1891 season, the Alleghenies were looking at signing a new second baseman. Now, to retain a player on your roster at this time, you had to at least include them on a list of reserved players. The Philadelphia Athletics failed to do that with a player named Lou Bierbauer. who the Alleghenies promptly signed. The Philadelphia Athletics filed an official complaint calling the actions of Allegheny piratical, which is a great word, essentially accusing the team of plundering players from other teams like a bunch of swashbuckling pirates. Perhaps enjoying this infamy and the insult, the Alleghenies renamed themselves to the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1891. Fun fact, Allegheny was eventually annexed in 1907, making 1908 the first season the Pittsburgh Pirates would actually play in Pittsburgh. The history of the St. Louis Cardinals begins with a team called the St. Louis Brown Stockings. This team was named after the color of their socks, because that's what you did back then. Now, the Brown Stockings began playing professionally in 1875, but they were actually thrown out of the league for fixing games. Now bankrupt, a semi-pro version of the team continued to play games through 1881. They would travel city to city, playing exhibition matches. Finally, ahead of the 1882 season, the team was purchased by a new owner and became a founding member of the American Association. This marks the beginning of the St. Louis Cardinals as the professional franchise that we recognize today. Though at the time, they retained the name of the previous team. They were still the St. Louis Brown Stockings. Because of a uniform change, meaning they got different socks, after only one season, the team dropped stockings from their name, becoming the St. Louis Browns. In 1891, the team transitioned to the National League, but they retained their name. New ownership came in 1899, and with it, they brought new uniforms with the signature cardinal red color as a trim on the uniform. Despite having this sweet color, the team was renamed to the Perfectos.
Oh.
However, the color change proved to be much more popular than the name change. Columnist Willie McHale overheard one woman call the new color a lovely shade of cardinal, and he began referring to the team as the Cardinals. The popularity of this nickname...
The Cardinals is... I've never really heard of the word cardinal before, coming across this baseball team. I just assumed it was a bird. I didn't know it was also a color. There we go.
So strong that the very next season, the team was officially renamed to the St. Louis Cardinals that we know today. The Phillies began life in 1883 as an expansion team for the National League, and they were named the Philadelphia Quakers. Quaker City is one of Philadelphia's famous nicknames, along with the City of Brotherly Love, not to be confused with the mid-90s sitcom Brotherly Love that starred the Lawrence brothers, real brothers from Philadelphia, playing brothers also from Philadelphia. In 1884, the team sought to change their name to the Philadelphia Philadelphias, following the tradition of naming your team after the pluralizing of the city name.
Don't laugh at Philadelphia anymore, Joe. Just don't do it to yourself. Don't do it. Philadelphia is an amazing name.
Much like Alleghenies. But since that is somewhat ridiculous and would have been difficult to print in the late 1800s, newspapers continued to refer to them as the Quakers, or decided to opt for the much shorter Phillies. By 1890, the team was officially renamed the Philadelphia Phillies, permanently adopting the abbreviation. In 1944, the team was sold after the owner was banned for betting on his own team. The new ownership tried to change the name to the Philadelphia Blue Jays. The name never really stuck, though, and Johns Hopkins University, whose team is also nicknamed the Blue Jays, objected to being associated with such a bad team. Ouch. Blue Jays was actually so unpopular that it never even took over the name spot on the front of their jerseys. Instead, the new mascot just appeared on the sleeve. In 1950, the team officially dropped the Blue Jay name and returned, as it should have been, back to being the Philadelphia Phillies. The San Francisco Giants began life in New York City as the new...
We're not getting any information on the logos. I assumed it would also be thrown in here, but it's not being... Just gives us another opportunity to do another video on these MLB teams. This is interesting, though. It's funny to see some of these old names. Some of them are shocking, not going to lie. Looks like most of them have arrived to the correct decision on the current names, haven't they? The New York Gothams goes hard. Look at this, New York Gothams. Let's go back 10 seconds. I missed the start of that.
Blue Jay name and returned, as it should have been, back to being the Philadelphia Phillies. The San Francisco Giants began life in New York City as the New York Gothams in 1883.
Why change from the
Gothams was
Gothams?
chosen because of its popularity as a nickname for New York. So popular, in fact, that it would later be used as the name of the fictional Gotham City in Batman comics nearly 60 years later. As legend goes, after a particularly good victory against those Phillies, in 1885, then manager Jim Moutrie praised the team, calling them, "My big fellows, my giants." Though this may be an apocryphal story, from that point on the team was known as the New York Giants. In 1958, the Giants became one of the 2 teams to move for the first time to the West Coast. Looking for a new stadium and having multiple seasons of dwindling success, they first looked to Minnesota before being wooed by the mayor of San Francisco, becoming the San Francisco Giants. This move, however, was only going to be allowed if 2 teams moved to California together, expanding baseball out west. The Los Angeles Dodgers began as the Brooklyn Grays in 1884.
Brooklyn Grays.
Named by reporters after their gray uniforms, of course. They began playing in the American Association. And this is where things get confusing.
Okay.
The legal name of the Brooklyn-based team was the Brooklyn Baseball Club. However, they often went by multiple different nicknames. Oftentimes, these nicknames all overlapped and none were the official name of the team. In 1884, they went by the Brooklyn Atlantics. Starting in 1888, they alternated between the Brooklyn Bridegrooms and the Brooklyn Grooms because apparently a lot of their players got married that year. In 1899, they became the Brooklyn Superbas, named after a popular circus act, the Hanlon's Superbas.
What was going on in
Brooklyn? It was
Brooklyn?
a traveling vaudeville-style show, and I have no idea why they named their team after it. For much of the early 1900s, the team was also called the Brooklyn Robins, after manager Wilbert Robinson, who went on to lead the team to the pennant in 1916 and 1920. However, amongst all of these nicknames, one was common throughout and popular amongst both fans and the newspapers: the Brooklyn Trolley Dodgers. Note the question marks there. There is some...
Why, man? The Brooklyn Trolley Dodgers. Is a trolley the same thing in America as it is in England? Like, if you go shopping, you get a shopping trolley. You guys call it a shopping cart, but a shopping trolley. What, man?
Some dispute as to when the name started. By one record in 1895, a newspaper reported that the Trolley Dodgers is the new name which Easton baseball cranks have given the Brooklyn Club. Trolley Dodgers was given to the team as a name because locals believed the moving from the horse-drawn buggies to trolleys posed a great danger for the people of Brooklyn. At some point, the name was shortened to Dodgers, but it wasn't until 1916 that the team formally recognized Dodgers as a nickname for the team, printing Dodgers on a World Series program. But even then, the team continued using Robins as well, and it wasn't until 1932 that Dodgers officially appeared on their jerseys. Now, in 1958, much like the Giants, the Dodgers began looking for a new place to build a baseball stadium. They eventually began talks with the city of Los Angeles and agreed to move as long as their crosstown rivals, the New York Giants, also moved to California, keeping their rivalry intact. That is how we got the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Baltimore Orioles began as a minor league team playing in the Western League as the Milwaukee Brewers. In 1900, the Western League became the American League and announced that it would be a professional league directly in competition with the National League. A few years later, the leagues would merge, becoming Major League Baseball. Playing in the American League's inaugural season in 1901, Brewers was the nickname that had been used for baseball teams in Milwaukee dating all the way back to the 1800s. This references Milwaukee's famous brewing industry, founding multiple breweries, including Miller Brewing Company, which was founded in 1855, all of this culminating in giving Milwaukee the city nickname of Brew City. Unfortunately, this just wasn't the time for professional baseball in Milwaukee. After only one season in 1902, the Brewers moved to St. Louis, becoming the St. Louis Browns. If that sounds familiar, Browns
does.
was chosen because it was the former name of their now crosstown rivals, the St. Louis Cardinals, who abandoned the name in 1898. After those crosstown rival Cardinals were sold to new owners, the owner of the Browns realized that he didn't have the finances to compete for the fandom of St. Louis residents. And the truth was, his Browns already lagged behind the Cardinals in terms of performance on the field. The team's first attempt to move was back to Milwaukee in 1953, but the move was blocked by the American League owners. The second option became Baltimore, but the league would only allow the move if then owner Bill Veeck would sell his ownership in the team. Long story short, he was not well liked for his antics by the other owners in the American League. So in 1954, the team moved to Baltimore and became the Baltimore Orioles. Orioles was chosen as a nickname because of a minor league team that played in the city previously and was much beloved. They even had...
What is an Oriole? Is it a bird? Is it a type of bird? Is it what I'm seeing in the picture? I've never really heard of this word before. Same with Cardinals. I'm not a massive bird guy. What can I say?
Had Babe Ruth before he became a pro. The name also belonged to a different franchise that played in the city in the American League for 2 seasons, but had already moved. But more on that later. All of these teams were named after a beloved symbol of Maryland, an Oriole, specifically the Baltimore Oriole. This bird shares its coloring with the Calvert seal section of the Maryland flag and became the state bird of Maryland in 1947, just 7 years before the Baltimore Oriole baseball team arrived. Another team beginning in 1901 was the Boston Red Sox. They too were an original franchise of the American League. This is going to be a trend in this video. And they set up shop as the crosstown rivals of the Boston Bean Eaters. Remember them? Though lacking an official nickname, the team often went by the Boston Americans, or the Bostonians, or the American Leaguers, or the Pilgrims. Anyway, remember when the Bean Eaters, formerly the Boston Red Stockings, became the Doves in 1907 and stopped wearing red socks? When that happened, the Boston Americanian Pilgrims jumped quickly to change their name to the Boston Red Sox. And they got the socks to match, too. This move in 1908 began to cement them as the premier team in Boston, and the rest was history. The Chicago White Sox began playing as a minor league team named the Sioux City Cornhuskers, and they played in the Western League. When the Western League became the American League, they played one final season as a minor league team. In a super sneaky move that totally wasn't planned out before, the league moved the team from Sioux City to Chicago's South Side and took up the nickname White Stockings. After this final season as a minor league team, the AL announced that they would become a major league team, and thus the Chicago White Stockings were born. In 1904, to keep up with sweet abbreviations, the team changed their name to the Chicago White Sox, and have remained so ever since. Oh, and yes, it was about the color of their socks. The Cleveland Indians also began as a minor league team playing in the Western League. Originally playing in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in 1900, the Grand Rapids Rustlers moved to Cleveland and became the Cleveland Lakeshores. This makes sense as a name because Cleveland is on the shore of a Great Lake. When the American League became a major league in 1901, the team became the Cleveland Bluebirds. The players immediately disliked the name. The team tried to shorten it to the Cleveland Blues that very same season, but it still didn't work. The players tried to rename the team themselves to the Cleveland Broncos the next season in 1902, but that name too failed to catch on. The team was then renamed in 1903 to the Cleveland Naps after the team captain, who was nicknamed Nap. Nap would go on to manage the team as well for a few years until in 1915 he was traded. The now napless Naps needed a new nickname. That new nickname was the Cleveland Indians. Whew. We're back into this territory, aren't we? All right, diving in. The team is apparently named after a former player of the Cleveland Spiders team that played in the late 1890s named Louis Sockalexis. Sockalexis was from the Penobscot tribe and had died a few years prior to the team being renamed to the Indians. He is often credited as the first baseball player of Native American descent. Now, in an article from 2012 on clevescene.com, writer Peter Patakos examines the origins of the club's logo, mascot, and name, and he notes that the club's official stance on the name is that they are, quote, proud to acknowledge and foster the legacy of Louis Francis Sockalexis. But Patakos notes that this is a highly unlikely and progressive stance for the team to have made in 1915. He writes, when the Cleveland Baseball Club was renamed to the Indians from the Naps in 1915, the Civil Rights Act was still 49 years from reality. Women could not vote, and racism against all minorities raged across America. It hadn't yet been 3 full decades since Custer's last stand, and the bloody Indian Wars continued in the American West into the 1920s. In the same article, sports writer Joe Posniansky adds, why exactly would people in Cleveland, this in a time when Native Americans were generally viewed as a subhuman in America, named their team after a relatively minor and certainly troubled outfielder? He goes on to say, in all versions of the story, Sockalexis had to deal with horrendous racism, terrible taunts, whoops from the crowd, and so on. Finally, the article continues with an NYU history professor who posits that the franchise was renamed not in honor of Sockalexis, but the fun that the crowd had at the time, which would seem was often at his expense. Now, these videos that I make are essentially glorified Wikipedia deep dives.
But we love them,
so
mate.
I don't
Thank you.
usually link to every page that I read in researching, but I will link this article. It's a good read in tackling important questions about the origins of the Cleveland Indians nickname. So much more could and should be said, but for now, we will leave it here with the Cleveland Indians. Again, we begin in the Western League.
Okay, we're not going to move on to the Detroit Tigers, guys. We are about halfway through the video there. We've left it at the Cleveland Indians. Next one is going to be Detroit Tigers. We're going to drop a part 2 to this. It'll be the next video after this one. I hope you guys did enjoy the video. I don't particularly like doing 2-part videos, but it's such a long one that it kind of has to be done here. It's very interesting, though, to find out the history of these teams, how they've moved. Some of them have made the biggest move you can possibly make, right? All the way over here from the east, all the way over to the west. You had to have 2 of them to build the market over in the west. It's cool to learn about some of these old nicknames. Horrible, absolutely terrible ideas. But what can you do? The Trolley Dodgers is the best one, though, so far. You guys, let me know what you think of this video down in the comments. Give the video a like. Please do subscribe, guys. 77% not subscribed. That's terrible. Please click that subscribe button. I'll see you for the next one. Take it easy. Peace.